The keys were still warm when I picked them up. Marcus always left them in the same spot, right by the fruit bowl, and I'd walked past that spot 10,000 times without looking twice. But that night something small and black was zip-tied to the ring, tucked behind his truck fob like it wanted to be forgotten. A USB drive. 2 letters in his handwriting on a strip of masking tape. P. Taxes. I almost set it back down. Marcus has never done taxes in his life. Paige does ours every February, at the kitchen table, complaining the whole time. 3 nights later, he stood in that same kitchen and told me what he really wanted. A daughter's fine for now, he said, not raising his voice, which somehow made it worse. But every man wants somebody to carry his name. And you gave me a consolation prize. I found someone who could finish the job. I didn't cry, and I want that on the record, because it matters later. I went to my office, sat down, and wrote the date and time on a legal pad. 11:47 p.m. By the night of my sister's gender reveal party, everyone standing in that backyard would know exactly whose name was on every account that mattered. I carried the drive into my office, locked the door, and plugged it into my laptop. My hand wouldn't stop shaking long enough to type the password right the first time. My name is Rin Calloway. I'm 38, and I've spent the last 11 years as an escrow officer at a title company outside Charlotte. People assume that job is boring. It isn't. I'm the one who gets pulled into a conference room when a wire looks wrong, when a number sits half a cent off, when somebody's down payment shows up from a source nobody can explain. Reading fine print is basically my whole personality at this point. I've built a career on noticing what other people miss. Marcus and I had been married 12 years. He manages construction crews, mid-level, good with his hands and better with people, the kind of guy who remembers everyone's kid's name at the company picnic. For most of those 12 years, I would have told you we were solid. Not perfect. Solid. Our daughter Josie is 6. She has my mother's stubborn chin and absolutely nobody's patience, and I would set myself on fire before I let anything hurt her. The one person in my family who never made me feel like an afterthought is my grandmother, Nana Vivian. She's 81, sharp as a tack, and she adores Josie the way she used to adore me. When I was 16 and my parents had spent an entire Christmas talking about how proud they were of Paige's cheer squad trophy, Nana Vivian pulled me into her kitchen and said, "You were never the spare. You were the one who could actually be trusted." I've held on to that sentence for 22 years. Trusted meant something specific in our family. It meant I was the one who booked Nana Vivian's doctor appointments, who organized Thanksgiving, who quietly paid for things when nobody else stepped up. Paige was the pretty one, the fun one, the one my parents bailed out every time a boyfriend went bad or a credit card got maxed out. Nobody ever called it favoritism out loud. They didn't have to. So when Paige, 8 months into being unemployed, suddenly paid off her car and put a down payment on a house, I noticed. I notice numbers for a living. I told myself it was a settlement from her last relationship, or help from our parents, or some inheritance nobody had mentioned. I told myself a lot of things that spring. I never once asked her directly where the money came from. I should have. 3 months before I found that drive, we were all crowded around my parents' dining table, passing green beans, when Marcus set his fork down and said it like he was commenting on the weather. "We're thinking about one more. Might be time to try for a boy." My mother laughed, actual laughter, and reached over to pat Josie's head like she was a puppy that had performed a trick. Well, this one can still be the practice round. Nobody at that table flinched. 12 people passing casseroles, and not one of them thought that sentence was strange. That's the part one keep coming back to. I said, as gently as I could manage with my daughter sitting 3 feet away, that Josie wasn't a practice anything, and that my doctor had been clear another pregnancy carried real risk for me. Marcus smiled at the table like I'd made a joke. Later, in the car, the smile was gone. "Your medical situation is convenient for you," he said, staring straight through the windshield. "Not so convenient for me." I didn't answer. I watched Josie in the rearview mirror instead, humming to herself, headphones on, and told myself she hadn't heard any of it. She had heard some of it. That night, brushing her teeth, she looked up at me with a mouthful of foam and asked, "Mom, am I not the right kind of kid?" I've sat across a closing table from men trying to hide a second mortgage from their own wives. I've kept my face perfectly still reading numbers that would end a marriage. Nothing in that job ever hollowed me out the way those 9 words did, standing in a bathroom that smelled like bubblegum toothpaste. I told her she was exactly the right kind of kid, the only kind I ever wanted, and I meant every word of it. But something in me had already started cataloging. Marcus stopped saying someday after that dinner. He stopped saying we'll see. He started talking like a man who already had an answer and was just waiting for the right time to use it. I didn't know yet what that answer was. It took another 6 weeks to find out, and by then it had already cost my sister more than she realized she was spending. If your own family has ever told you, straight out or in some coded, smiling way, that you weren't enough, drop it in the comments. I read those. 6 weeks after that dinner, Paige called an emergency family meeting, which in our family just means she wanted an audience. She announced she was pregnant. Unmarried. When my mother asked, delighted and already crying, who the father was, Paige just smiled and said it was a private arrangement through a clinic, and that was all anyone was going to get out of her. Nobody pushed. Nobody ever pushes Paige. We spent the next hour on nursery colors and whether it might be a boy. Somewhere in there my mother mentioned Josie's birthday was coming up, then pivoted straight back to baby names before anyone could answer her. That's when I noticed the drive again. Marcus's keys were sitting on my parents' counter, the same small black rectangle zip-tied to the ring, taxes facing up like it had been facing up the whole time, waiting for me to actually look. I looked a beat too long. Marcus crossed the kitchen, scooped up his keys, and slid them into his pocket in one motion, like he'd rehearsed it. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Over the following weeks, Marcus started driving Paige to appointments. Just one, he told me, as a favor, since her car was in the shop. My mother thought it was the sweetest thing, her son-in-law stepping up while Paige had nobody else to lean on. She said it twice at dinner, like she wanted us all to admire him for it. I sat at that table and watched my husband and my sister carefully not look at each other. Not once. Not when my mother refilled Paige's water glass, not when Josie asked if the new baby was going to be a boy or a girl, not even when I passed Marcus the potatoes and our hands came within an inch of touching. Two people who'd spent their whole lives comfortable in a crowded room were suddenly working hard to take up as little space as possible. I told myself it was nothing. Pregnant women get exhausted. In-laws get awkward. Families get weird around new babies. I told myself a lot of things that night, too. The wire transfer, when I finally saw it, wouldn't let me tell myself any of that again. For days before Josie's 7th birthday, my bank sent a fraud alert. Large outbound transfer, joint account, the one we barely touch because it exists mostly for the mortgage. I almost ignored the text. Then I remembered I was the only one who ever logged into that account, and I sat up in bed and opened the app. $61,240. Sent to Paige. Memo line empty. Timestamp, 11:52 p.m. I read the number 3 times before it stopped rearranging itself in front of me. Marcus was asleep. I got up, went to the office, and shut the door quietly, the way you do when you don't yet know if what you're about to find is going to require you to be quiet or loud, and some part of you is already betting on quiet. His keys were on the desk. The drive was still there. I plugged it in. 2 files. The first was the wire confirmation, same amount, same timestamp, sitting there in plain black and white like it had nothing to hide. The second was a scanned document, 5 months old, titled in a font someone had clearly thought looked official, a reproductive arrangement agreement between Marcus and Paige. Payment, it said, for services rendered in achieving a male child via home insemination. His signature was on the bottom. So was hers. I want to tell you I screamed, or threw something, or woke the whole house up. I didn't. There was no one to perform that for. It was midnight, my office door shut, and the only sound was the small mechanical hum of the laptop fan. I picked up my phone and started dialing Nana Vivian's house out of some old instinct, some leftover 16-year-old part of me that still thought she could fix this the way she'd fixed everything else. I got as far as the area code before I looked at the clock. 1 in the morning. She was 81. I hung up before it rang. Instead, I sat there in the dark with Josie's baby monitor glowing on the desk beside the laptop, both screens washing the room in the same pale light, and watched my daughter sleep, one arm thrown over her head the way she's slept since she was 2. She was the reason any of this mattered. Not the money. Not the betrayal, exactly either. Her. I sat there long enough that the monitor's auto brightness dimmed twice. Then I closed the laptop, unplugged the drive, and put it back exactly where I'd found it, angle and all. Okay, I said, to no one. Now I know what I'm dealing with. Grief got one night. That was all I gave it. What came after was procedure. I went into the office the next morning like it was any other Tuesday. Coffee, badge, the same hello to the front desk I've said for 11 years. Then I sat down at my terminal and pulled a file I had no real business pulling. Pages closing. The house she'd supposedly bought with savings, 8 months unemployed, no explanation anyone had bothered to ask for. It took 2 clicks to get to the funding source disclosure. The down payment hadn't come straight from our joint account. It had gone through Paige's personal checking first, sat there for 6 days, then moved to the closing agent. A layer deliberately built in so anyone glancing at the closing statement would just see Paige's own money doing what Paige's own money was supposed to do. I recognized the escrow officer who'd handled it. Dana, 2 desks down from mine most weeks, someone I'd shared a break room fridge with for 3 years. I walked over, casual, coffee in hand, and asked how long they typically retained wire source documentation on residential closings. Dana didn't blink. Standard 7 years, she said, sometimes longer if a lender flags it. I thanked her and told her I was double-checking something for a training I was putting together. It wasn't a lie. I was putting something together. Back at my desk, I laid the dates out in a column, the way I lay out every file that matters. The wire from our joint account, March 9th, 11:52 p.m. The reproductive arrangement, signed by both of them, March 14th. Paige's closing, funded by that same money 1 layer removed, March 20th, 11 days, start to finish. I've closed hundreds of houses. I know what it takes to move that kind of money cleanly, get a contract drafted and signed, get a closing scheduled and funded, all without a single flag going up in the system. That doesn't happen by accident. Someone sat down in advance and built a file. This wasn't a man who'd made one weak, impulsive choice in a moment of wanting something he couldn't have. This was a transaction, structured, timed, and closed like a piece of real estate, with my sister as both the seller and the asset changing hands. If Marcus could build a file that clean, he'd forgotten something important about who he'd married. I could build one too. I booked the consultation under the name Renee Hartley. I don't know exactly why. Maybe some part of me wasn't ready to say out loud, even to a stranger behind a desk, that this was actually my life. By the second meeting, I gave the attorney my real name and my real file, and she read through it without a single change in her expression, which told me she'd seen worse and that I was going to be fine. She explained 2 things I hadn't let myself hope for. First, because the $61,000 had come out of marital funds without my knowledge or consent, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was a documented financial one, and it would carry real weight in any divorce filing. Second, in our state, an agreement like the one on that drive meant nothing on its own. Without proper court approval through a licensed surrogacy process, it was, in her words, a piece of paper 2 people wrote and signed to make themselves feel official. The child's legal standing, if Marcus was imagining a clean custody claim, was a lot messier than he understood. I didn't say much. I just listened and took notes, the way I take notes on every closing that matters. The next 5 weeks I spent building. I opened a new account at a different bank, one Marcus didn't know existed, and moved a portion of my own paycheck into it a little at a time. I wrote down dates, times, and exact words after every strange conversation. I paid a professional data recovery service to image the drive's contents properly and had copies notarized, so nothing could ever be waved away as something I'd altered or invented. Through all of it, I kept showing up. Sunday dinners. A birthday lunch for my mother. I laughed in the right places, passed the roles, and let everyone believe I was exactly as unaware as they needed me to be. Marcus and Paige, meanwhile, got bolder. They stopped hiding the appointments. They started talking openly, in front of the family, about a gender reveal, Paige wanting something bigger than the last one my cousin threw, my mother offering the backyard, everyone leaning into the planning with a kind of loud, careless joy that only people who think they've already won can afford. I sat one room over from that joy most nights, working quietly at my laptop, building a file exact enough that nobody would be able to call it emotional. The invitation came by text on a Tuesday. Paige's baby reveal, June 21st. A minute later, Marcus's message underneath it. You'll be there, right? Family only. I would be there. Just not for the reason he thought. My parents' backyard had a balloon arch, pink on one side, blue on the other, arranged carefully enough that you could tell my mother had spent real money on it. Folding chairs covered the lawn, maybe 35 people total, cousins and neighbors and a few of Paige's friends from the gym she used to go to before she stopped working out and started planning nurseries. Nana Vivian sat in a low lawn chair near the shade, Josie curled into her lap in a sundress, both of them fanning themselves with paper plates. Marcus checked his phone 4 times in the first 10 minutes. I counted. Paige found a seat on the opposite side of the yard and stayed there, laughing loudly at something her friend said, never once letting her eyes drift my direction. My mother stood up with a glass of lemonade around the 20-minute mark and tapped it with a spoon. This family, she said, beaming at the balloon arch like it was a monument, always finds a way to grow. A few people clapped. I smiled along with everyone else. Before I get to what happened next, wherever you're reading this, driving, folding laundry, lying in bed with the lights off, tell me where you're listening from. I want to know who's with me for this part, because the yard is about to go very quiet. My bag sat by my folding chair, unremarkable, the kind of tote every woman at that party was carrying. Inside was a manila folder, notarized copies inside, each page exactly where I'd left it that morning. My keys were in the side pocket, and clipped to that ring now was a small black USB drive that used to hang from someone else's. Marcus stood up, walked to the dessert table, and picked up the knife beside the cake. 2 layers, white frosting, a small plastic stork on top. He turned to face the crowd, smiling the easy, practiced smile he'd worn at our own wedding, and raised the knife over the first slice like a man about to be handed exactly what he'd paid for. The knife went into the cake. My hand went into my bag. Blue. The inside of that cake was blue, and the yard erupted before the slice had even cleared the platter. My mother shrieked and grabbed my father's arm. Paige's friends jumped up hugging each other. For about 10 seconds, it was the happiest I'd seen my family in years. I stood up, folder in hand. Since we're all here, I said, and something in my voice must have carried, because the clapping thinned out fast, I'd like to say something. I walked to the dessert table, past Marcus, who was still holding the knife like he hadn't decided whether to set it down. I laid 2 pages flat on the tablecloth, right beside the cut cake, so nobody would have to squint from their chair to see them. Congratulations, I said. You finally got your son. I looked at Marcus when I said the next part, because I wanted him watching my face for it. But I have the wire transfer, the contract, and a lawyer who already filed. So you'll be raising him without me. I turned to my sister, who had gone very still in her chair. And Paige, you'll be raising him without a house, since that down payment was mine too. Nobody moved, so I kept going. I needed there to be no room, later, for anyone to call this a misunderstanding. $61,240, I said. Sent at 11:52 at night, out of an account with my name on it, 4 days before my daughter's birthday, so neither of you would have to explain where it came from. Marcus's face didn't just pale. It emptied, like something had been unplugged behind it. Paige started crying, the fast, ugly kind that comes when a person realizes the room isn't on their side anymore. She half rose out of her chair and reached toward the folder, hands shaking. Don't, I said. Everyone's already seen it. She sat back down. Somewhere behind me I heard Josie's voice, small and confused, asking Nana Vivian what was happening, why Mommy looked like that, why nobody was smiling anymore. I didn't turn around fast enough to stop what came next, but I didn't need to. Nana Vivian pulled my daughter into her lap, wrapped both arms around her, and said, low enough that only the people close to her could hear it. "Nothing that needs explaining to you, baby. Not today." The yard went genuinely silent, the kind where you can hear a dog barking 3 houses down and ice settling in somebody's abandoned lemonade. The cake sat there between us, half-cut, ordinary white frosting hiding blue on the inside, exactly the surprise Paige and Marcus had planned, just not the one they'd meant to give. That lasted about 4 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. Marcus found his voice first. "It's not what it looks like," he said, too loud, the way people get when they know exactly how it looks. Nobody answered. That seemed to make it worse. He tried again, sharper this time, stepping toward me. "You had no right going through my things." "They were on our joint account," I said. "That makes them my things too." He reached for the folder. I watched his hand close around the edge of it, and before I had to say a word, a woman near the back fence stood up and walked over, unhurried, the way people move when they already know how this ends. She'd come with me as a family friend. Nobody at that party knew she was my attorney. "Copies already exist with counsel," she said, pleasant as a stranger asking to borrow a chair. "That one's just for today." Marcus's hand came off the folder like it had gotten hot. Paige hadn't said a single word since I'd read the amount out loud. She was still crying when her boyfriend, Dennis, who'd been standing 3 feet from her holding a plate of cake he'd never touched, set the plate down on an empty chair. "A home insemination arrangement," he said, quiet, like he was making sure he had the words right. "With her sister's husband." Paige reached for his arm. He stepped back from it. "I'm done," he said, to no one in particular, and walked straight through the side gate without looking back. My mother stood near the balloon arch, the same spot she'd toasted from 20 minutes earlier, and for the first time in my life I watched her not rush to Paige's side. She didn't defend her. She didn't defend Marcus either. She just stood there with her lemonade going warm in her hand, looking at the two of them like she'd never seen either of their faces before. Guests started leaving in 2s and 3s, murmuring the kind of goodbyes people give when they want to be anywhere else. A few of them stopped by me first. My cousin squeezed my shoulder. An old neighbor hugged me longer than the moment really called for and didn't say anything at all, which somehow said everything. I picked up Josie's hand. Nana Vivian caught my eye and nodded once, the way she used to when I was 16, and telling me, without words, that I'd done exactly the right thing. Marcus was still standing by the ruined cake table when I turned to go, the knife somewhere on the grass where he must have dropped it. "Ran, please," he said, to my back. I didn't stop walking. Josie's hand stayed warm in mine the whole way to the car. He'd say please a lot more in the weeks that followed. It wouldn't change anything. Marcus called almost every day for the first month. Some days he apologized, long rambling messages about pressure and mistakes and how much he loved Josie. Other days he blamed me, said I'd humiliated him in front of the whole family, like the humiliation had started with me and not with a signature on a piece of paper. He showed up at my new apartment once, in October, standing in the hallway with a bag of takeout from the place we used to order from on Fridays, like that might mean something. I opened the door far enough to tell him any conversation from now on would go through our attorneys, then closed it. Calmly. I didn't owe him an explanation, and I didn't give him one. Paige's pregnancy showed by late summer, visible under everything she wore, a constant reminder to a family that had celebrated it once and now could barely look at her. The house was gone by then, the down payment clawed back in Marcus's divorce settlement, the same money that had bought her that home now unbuying it piece by piece. Dennis never came back. She moved into her childhood bedroom in September, and my mother, who used to fight anyone who criticized her, started leaving rooms when Paige walked into them. Marcus, in the end, lost close to what he'd spent trying to build himself a different family, plus legal fees that kept climbing every month his attorney fought mine. And the son he'd been so sure would carry his name arrived into a custody situation far messier than he'd planned for, because a contract two people write in secret doesn't hold up the way a real one does. He has far less claim to that child's life than he ever imagined standing in my kitchen that night, so certain of himself. Nana Vivian never wavered, not once, through any of it. She sat with me one afternoon that fall, her hand over mine on her kitchen table, and said the thing I needed someone in that family to finally say out loud. "You were always enough," she told me. It just took the rest of them a lot of money to prove they never deserved you. Josie's 7th birthday, the one that should have happened back in June, finally got celebrated in October, 3 months late, in my new apartment with a cake I baked myself. No balloon arch. No 35 guests. Just Nana Vivian, my cousin, 2 of Josie's real friends, and me, watching my daughter lean over 7 candles and blow every single one out on the first try. That birthday taught me something worth saying plainly, once, at the end. I used to think family meant the people you were born connected to, whether they'd earned that connection or not. I don't believe that anymore. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who never once made you feel like the consolation prize. Nana Vivian taught me that before I had the words for it. Josie reminds me of it every single day, just by being exactly who she is and never once needing to be anything else. And a small handful of relatives, cousins mostly, a couple of aunts, quietly reached out in the months after that party, not to defend what happened, just to say they'd been wrong all those years to stay so quiet. I kept my job. I kept my daughter. I kept my name, the one that was mine before I ever married into someone else's plans for it. I kept my peace, too, and it turns out that was the one thing in this whole story that was never for sale, no matter what anybody was willing to pay. If you've made it this far, tell me about the moment you finally knew that enough was enough for you. I read those too, even the ones people are scared to post under their real name. These days, most Saturdays, Josie and I bake together in our small kitchen, flour on the counter, radio on low. No hidden meaning behind any of it anymore. No reveal waiting inside. Just her, standing on a step stool beside me, asking if we can make the frosting blue again. Because she likes the color. That's all it ever needs to be.